بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت حباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثا فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشعمة ما أصحاب المشعمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريق وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون إذا متنا وكنا ترابا وعظاما أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون صدق الله العلي العظيم.
چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب ہر ایک رخ سے ہے تصویر فاطمہ زینب چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب وہی ہے فاتح کوفہ وہی ہے فاتح شام وہی ہے فاتح کوفہ وہی ہے فاتح شام انہی کے خود اسلام کی بقا زینب چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب یزیدیت کے تھپڑوں میں کشتیاں دی یزیدیت کے تھپڑوں میں کشتیاں دی تھی بعد کربلا اپنا خدا زینب چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب چھپا سکے گنا ظلم یزید کو دنیا چھپا سکے گنا ظلم یزید کو دنیا ہے جہد کربلا کا آئینہ زینب چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب نہ ہوگا تذکرہ کرب و بلا کا خط کبھی نہ ہوگا تذکرہ کرب و بلا کا خط کبھی فضا میں گونج رہی ہے آپ کی صدا زینب چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب سوال یہ تھا کہ ہے کون کربلا کا نقیب سوال یہ کیا کہ ہے کون کربلا کا نقیب ہر ایک دل نے یہ بے ساختہ کہا زینب چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب ظفر یہ مجلس و ماتم اسی کے دم سے ہے یہ واقعہ ہے بانی ادا زینب چراغ دین شبیر تو ضیا زینب ہر ایک رخ سے ہے تصویر فاطمہ Zainab.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ قالت الملائكة يا مريم إن الله اصطفاك وطهرك واصطفاك على نساء العالمين صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, I congratulate all of you on the occasion which we have come to celebrate, and that is the birthday of Zainab bint Ali wa Fatima, alayhim afusatu wasalam. Zainab, the daughter of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi afusatu wasalam, and the daughter of Fatima az-Zahra, salamullah alayha. According to various traditions, today, which is the 5th of Jamadul Ula, is the birthday of Zainab salamullah alayha. According to other traditions, which perhaps may be the more popular tradition, that is, the birthday of Zainab salamullah alayha is on the 1st of Sha'ban, that she was born in the 5th year of or after Hijrah. In any case, this is an opportunity for us to examine the life of Zainab salamullah alayha, and more importantly, to learn a lesson from the life of Zainab, from her character, from who she is. When we examine her life and study the life of Zainab salamullah alayha, we begin to understand the place and status of women in Islam. You know, she's just one of the many women that we can examine their lives to understand that. One of the lives of the women that we are directed to study and examine in the Quran. In fact, verse 42 of Surah Ali Imran, which we recited in the beginning, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He speaks about when He sent His angel or angels to Maryam salamullah alayha, in order to explain to her that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen her, He has purified her. So the angel said to Maryam, O Maryam, Allah inna Allah astafaki, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen you, wa tahharaki, and has purified you, wastafaki ala nisa il alamin, and has chosen you above the women in the world. So Maryam salamullah alayha, she sits as an archetype for us to examine, to study, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will choose among the people of the world a woman, or He will choose women from among the folks and the people of the world. So she sits as an archetype in this verse 42 of Surah Ali Imran, so 3:42, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He looks at His creation, again, male or female, He will choose among His creation men, and He will also choose among His creation women. And these men and women both will stand as archetypes for us, teach us about the status of men and women, or the status of the believers. So Maryam is an archetype. Among those chosen women as well, we can say, is Zainab salamullah alayha. Of course, when we examine her life, there's no doubt that she was chosen for a very blessed task, to do something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to serve as a role model for humanity, just as Maryam was also chosen. One of the parallels as well, as we see that Maryam salamullah alayha, she's from a prophetic household, and she was that chosen woman. Likewise, Zainab salamullah alayha, she is from that prophetic household, the household of Ali Muhammad, the household of the Prophet, and she was also chosen and selected among the women of her time to shoulder a very weighty responsibility, a responsibility that has even its repercussions today, or is the responsibility that has its effects today. Whenever we remember Imam Hussein alayhi wasallam, whenever we remember the tragedy of Karbala, the stance for justice, the stance against injustice, then Zainab salamullah alayha, she is that archetype. So women like Zainab salamullah alayha set a standard for women in multiple ways, not simply the responsibility that they had, but also in their position and relationship within their own families, their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, their relationship with Rasulullah, their relationship with their deen, their relationship with their husband, their relationship with their family members, with their children. So she sets as an archetype for this. And it is a lesson that both men and women should understand and they should learn. Because it teaches us about the status of women in Islam. And so in order for us to kind of comprehend this a bit better, I want to refer to one of the traditions by Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, wherein he brings about kind of this relationship that should exist in the household wherein there is a woman. And that woman should, of course, be following the model of Fatima Zahra, of Maryam, of Zainab al-Kubra, of Asiya, the wife of Fir'aun, who is a mu'mina, and so many other models that we have. So Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam is reported to have said, ثَلَاثَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِ فِيهِنَّ رَاحَةٌ. So he says that there are three things. If the mu'min has these three things, then he will be at ease. And what are these three things that a mu'min can have that will put him at ease? The first thing is darun wasi'atun tuwari awratahu wa su'a halihi min an-nas. And I'm going to come back and explain these things in a little bit more detail. So the first thing he says is a house or a place of residence which is vast, or at least vast enough where he can cover, this is awra, and we'll come back to this word, what that means, cover his, you could say his private parts, or cover his sacredness, or wasu'a halihi min an-nas. And so it covers the things that he should not be showing to people. And it covers also the bad state of a person. When that person's not in the best of situations, or best of conditions, maybe spiritually or ethically. So the second thing that the mu'min should have, according to Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, that if he had this, then he will be in raha, he'll be at ease. Imra'atun salihatun tu'inuhu ala amri dunya wal akhirah. The second thing is to have a righteous woman, a righteous wife or spouse. That this righteous woman or spouse will aid and assist that mu'min. And here, of course, we understand that the mu'min here in this hadith of Imam Sadiq ﷺ is not applying to both men and women, but a mu'min, a man who is a mu'min. That if he had these three things, then he would be at ease. So that second thing is a wife who is righteous. And what shows her righteousness? تُعِينُهُ عَلَى أَمْرِ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. And she aids and assists that mu'min in his worldly affairs and in his affairs that are related to the hereafter. And the third thing that Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam points out. He says, وَابْنَةٌ أَوْ أُخْتٌ يُخْرِجُهَا مِنْ مَنْزِلِهِ بِمَوْتٍ أَوْ بِتَزْوِيجٍ. And the third is to have a daughter or a sister. And this daughter or sister, he eventually, takes that daughter or sister, or she eventually leaves his home, or he brings her out of the house, either at the time of her passing away or transition to the akhirah, meaning that this is, he was with her, he was there, either assisting her or somehow by her side. That, again, that when she leaves from his house, it is in a transition back towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أو بتزويج, or that transition out of their home, the transition of that daughter or that sister is out of the home, بتزويج, through marriage. So now let us look at the first thing that Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he's talking about, because all of these things, it helps us to understand the status of women in Islam, and particularly we want to focus on Zainab salamullah alayha, and how she also kind of embodied these traits and these characteristics. So the first thing that Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam said, he says, Darun wasa', so a home that is, or a residence that is sufficient, we can say. Wasa' could be vast, but more importantly, it is something that is sufficient to meet that person's need and the needs of his family. And what is the purpose of that home and that residence that will meet the needs of his family? He says, tuwari awratahu. So that the aura can be covered. Now, of course, this aura has you could say, a meaning, which is the apparent meaning, demonstrative meaning, which means one's sacredness, one's the private, one's, the things that should not be shown. But also, aura, at times in the Arabic language, could also mean a woman, a wife, that she's the aura, she's something that you cover, she's someone that you protect and do not let any harm to reach her. Your family is also kind of considered your aura, to keep them out of harm. So that house or that residence should be such that you're protecting the aura. You're also at the same time with that home, that vast home, you're protecting or you're covering su'a halihi min nas. The su'a hal refers to a person's character, a person's trait. You cover that from people. That you do not engage with people with bad akhlaq. This doesn't mean that a person is given a green light that, oh, well, I can act out and be Fir'aun in my house as long as I don't bring it out into the streets. No, your home is a place where you're also taming your nafs and putting your nafs in check, so that you're not Fir'aun in your home, nor are you Fir'aun out in the streets or in public, or when you're in your masjid, when you're interacting with individuals. And this directly ties into that second thing that Imam Sadiq alayhi is speaking about, that woman who is righteous, who's helping that mu'min in his worldly and you could say spiritual affairs, or his affairs that are connected to his akhirah, which are his spiritual affairs. So while in that home, the mu'min is perfecting his akhlaq. His spouse is also helping him perfect his akhlaq. So that baytul, or that darun wasi', where they're covering their su'u hal, is not meaning that, oh, well, as long as I'm behind the closed door of my homes, I can act any way I want with my wife. I can say anything I want, do anything I want. No. So it means that this is a place that, yes, you are practicing. It's perhaps you could say, ground zero of practicing your akhlaq and your interaction with one of the creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we see in Surah Maryam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen such of these creations, these women, and chosen them with a special role in Islam, within a society, within the family as well. They're chosen. So at that ground zero, one is honing his akhlaq, and particularly as he's interacting with his spouse. And this is something that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he also pointed out in one of the very beautiful and famous hadiths. He says, "Ahsanun nasi imanan, ahsanuhum khuluqan, wa altafahum bi ahlihi." And he says, "Wa ana altafukum bi ahli." The Prophet of Allah, he says that the best person in their iman, so the best mu'min. Again, the hadith of Imam Ali, the first thing is that mu'min has is a dar wasit. And he's covering his sacredness, the sacredness of his household. He's covering his sometimes bad attitudes, su'ahalihi, or the bad state that he is in. But he covers it through that practice and having the best akhlaq with his family, first and foremost. As the Prophet says, the best among you in their iman is the best among you in your ethics, in your akhlaq. And the most latif and graceful of you with your family. Altafuhum bi ahlihi. Then the Prophet, he rightfully so, gives the best example of that. And that best example is himself. He says, "Wa ana altafukum bi ahli," and I am the most graceful, and I am the most kind, and the most generous person with regards to my family. And the Prophet, he also stated, "Wawassu ala ayalikum," and spread goodness to your family. Make your residence, or make it a place of comfort. And this is something that we definitely see in the life of Zainab salamullah alayha. And if you just read about the life and study the life of Zainab salamullah alayha, and the relationship that she had with Abdullah ibn Ja'far, again, it was a very good, and it was a good cordial relationship. It wasn't a relationship where the relationship was of su'ul hal, that there was a bad akhlaq between husband and wife. It was not a relationship where the husband, he's the fir'aun of the house, and simply he's commanding. And sometimes, I get these incidents where the husband says, "Oh, my wife, she wasn't listening to me." And when I begin to examine the situation, yes, the husband is simply commanding, "Oh, do this, wash the dishes, cook. When I come home, have the food ready." So when we say that she's not listening, it's like, well, you're simply commanding. You're not communicating. But when we look at the relationship between husband and wife, that exemplary relationship between husband and wife, which we find between the Prophet of Allah and Khadija. This is one very good example. And also some of the other wives of the Prophet as well. But then Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam and Fatima Zahra, the relationship between Zainab salamullah alayha and Abdullah ibn Ja'far, it was a relationship where they're communicating with one another. It's a relationship where, again, when Zainab salamullah alayha, she wanted to leave from Medina to travel to Mecca, then eventually to Karbala with Imam Hussein alayhi salatu, her brother, she came to Abdullah ibn Ja'far. And Abdullah ibn Ja'far, he said, "Yes, go. And then also take our sons. Let them represent me there," because Abdullah ibn Ja'far at the time, he was ill. He was not able to accompany Imam Hussein alayhi salatu. And then even when Zainab salamullah alayha, she returned back from the journey of Karbala, continuing her stance of justice and against injustice of the Bani Umayyah, eventually being exiled from Medina. She goes to Syria, where she stays on some land that Abdullah ibn Ja'far, he owned and he had purchased there. And so, again, this is where Abdullah ibn Ja'far, he has, again, been accommodating towards his family. So that mu'min who wants to live in ease, or who wants to have that raha that Imam Sadiq is stating, he says the first thing is that they must have darun wasi'ah, so a sufficient residence, tuwari awratuhu, where he's safeguarding, you can say, his family, safeguarding those things which are sacred to him, and also safeguarding his bad state at times. So, yeah, everyone has mood changes. Everyone has sometimes good days and bad days. And so in your home, you cover those bad days or those mood changes by being there and not letting that spill out into the community, not letting it spill out into society. But at the same time, be careful not to create a situation which is volatile and which is tense for one's spouse, because this is not of the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salatu wasalam, but rather the best of akhlaq, and particularly as the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stated that the best of you in the iman, again, is the best of you with regards to your character and your interaction and your kindness towards your family. The second thing which Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he points to that a mu'min should have if he wants to have this ease, this raha. Imra'atun salihatun ta'inuhu ala amri dunya wal akhirah, is a righteous and a believing, a mu'minah wife. And this believing wife, this wife who is righteous, who is salihah, it's not someone that, well, she's salihah simply because she does all of these things, or she listens to my commands. No, she is salihah because she is a part of you could say, that life's journey for that husband, that life's journey for their family, whereby she is aiding the family in their worldly affairs, aiding that mu'min, that husband, in his worldly affairs, and also in the affairs related to his akhirah. And the best example that we can find of this, particularly in the life of Zainab salamullah alayha, is that if we compare the women of Karbala versus the women of Kufa. And of course, Zainab salamullah alayha, she was the leading role model of the women of Karbala. The women of Kufa, on the other hand, if we look at their actions, these are those women that Ibn Ziyad, when he wanted to create a situation where the people of Kufa, they will turn against their promise to Imam Hussein, they will betray Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. Ibn Ziyad, he gathered and called for the women to come. And he told the women, he says that, look, bring the swords, the weapons and spears of your husbands and your children, your sons, and I will pay you for them. But if you don't do this, then know that I will kill your husbands, I will kill your sons. So he threatened the women, and the women, again, many of them, not all of them, many of them complied. They took the weapons of their sons and their husbands, gave them to Ibn Ziyad, and then later, of course, as we know the history of Ibn Ziyad, he paid the men again to take their swords back and to stand against Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. But when we look at the role of the women of Karbala, the head of them is Zainab salamullah alayha. These women were women who they understood the challenges of their society, and they stood firm on the principles of justice. They stood firm on the principles of Islam. They encouraged their household from their husbands, even if their husbands were those men who were already firm in their understanding, their ideology, their position for justice and against injustice. These women were also there backing them. And we see that in the example of Zainab salamullah alayha. We see it in the sacrifice that Zainab salamullah alayha made on the battlefields of Karbala, sacrificing her sons. We see this in those women who, again, followed the example of Zainab salamullah alayha. Even to the point that perhaps it did not fare well, or their sons didn't listen. One example is To'a. So To'a, she took in Muslim ibn Aqil, tried to protect him, encouraged her son not to say anything to protect Muslim ibn Aqil, the wazir of Imam Hussein. Unfortunately, he sided with the wrong side, sided with Ibn Ziyad and the power structure at that time. But nonetheless, To'a was one of those women who embodied the trait and the characteristic of Zainab salamullah alayha. To'a was one of those women who was in Kufa, lived in Kufa. She perhaps witnessed and knew of Zainab salamullah alayha when Imam Ali alayhi salam was residing in Kufa. Because Zainab salamullah alayha, again, one of those exemplary women, like her mother as well, Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha, one of those exemplary women who was full of knowledge. In fact, when we look at the life of Zainab salamullah alayha, we see that she was the one, and she's perhaps the primary source for the khutbah of Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha, her mother. And reading the life of Zainab, she was about 5 years old at that time. But she memorized and she knew the sermon of her mother, salamullah alayha, back and forth, to the point that she, again, reiterated and she conveyed the sermon of her mother. So from the age of 5, she knew the sermon of her mother. Zainab salamullah alayha, she was also someone who was a teacher of the Quran, just like her mother. There are historical accounts that when Imam Ali alayhi salam, when he transferred the capital of the Muslim world from Medina to Kufa, roughly the second year, and that the women of Kufa, they began to realize Zainab salamullah alayha, the value of Zainab, the knowledge of Zainab, to the point that it's stated that some of the women, they encouraged their husbands, they told their husbands to go to Imam Ali alayhi salam and request Imam Ali to speak with Zainab and to have Zainab salamullah alayha to educate them, to teach them the Quran. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, he prepared the grounds for that. Again, this is, when we look at this, at that time, to prepare the grounds for a woman, shows that she had been selected, she had been chosen, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had chosen her for a great task. Imam Ali alayhi salam prepared the grounds for her to begin to educate the women of Kufa, to teach them the Quran, to teach them about their deen, their ahkam, their roles and their responsibility towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So she taught in Kufa. And those women who truly learned from Zainab salamullah alayha, those are the women, for example, like To'a. Those are the women who, for example, the wives of Muslim ibn Ma'usaja, or you could say the wife of like Hani ibn Urwa, the wife of Habib ibn Madahir. Again, seeing that example of Zainab, and seeing that she is someone who stood firm on the principles of justice and stood firm against injustice, that you find those women as well being and assistance to their husband. As you see, imra'atun salihatun tu'inu ala amri dunya wal akhirah, that they are assisting their husbands who are mu'min in their worldly affairs and also in their affairs related to the akhirah, keeping them on the path of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, keeping them on the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, keeping them on the path of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad alayhi wasallam, no matter what the difficulties may be. And surely the life of Zainab salamullah alayha, it shows that how she endured the difficulties that she faced. And this is why she has the title Ummul Masa'ib. In fact, during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, again, Zainab is a very young girl. It says that at one point she had a dream, and that dream was a disturbing dream. At least that's what she came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and told him about that dream. And the Prophet of Allah, he interpreted that dream. And that dream was when Zainab, she said that she had dreamt that there was a very strong wind blowing, to the point that she went and she grabbed onto a tree, to the trunk of a tree, and the wind was so strong it blew her. She fell down, and then she began to grab onto the roots, and then or actually the branch. She grabbed onto the branch of the tree, and because of the magnitude of the wind that was blowing, the branch broke, and so she grabbed another branch of the tree. He says, until that one broke as well, and she said she woke up. And she told Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about this dream, and so it brought tears to the eyes of Rasulullah. And he told her what the meaning of that dream was. He says, that tree that you grabbed onto, that trunk of the tree with its roots firmly planted in the ground, he says, that was me. That was Rasulullah. But it was taken away from you. And then you grabbed onto the branches, and the branches began to break. Says, and this was the Ahlul Bayt. This is, your mother and your father, and these are indicating, as the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stated the tragedy that Zainab salamullah alayha would see in her life. But yet, as we see that she still remained firm and she remained strong. She remained among those individuals that we can point out that if you want to summarize that trait that Zainab had, particularly as it relates to the hadith of Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says the second thing that the mu'min should have is a righteous wife that helps him in the affairs of this world and helps him in the affairs related to the akhirah, is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. MashaAllah, we had a beautiful recitation of Surah Al-Waqi'ah by one of our youth, Jawad, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he points out that group of individuals that he calls as-sabiqun as-sabiqun, ulaika al-muqarrabun, that those who are striving together. So this is that imra'atun salihah. This is that righteous wife that the mu'min has and that mu'min needs in order to have, as Imam Sadiq says, al-raha. That wife and that companion that will strive alongside of him. They will strive alongside of one another to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the way the tafsir of this particular surah goes as well, when we speak about the Ashabul Yameen, Allah says, وَمَا أَصْحَابُ الْيَمِينَ, or أَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ وَمَا أَصْحَابُ الْمَشْأَمَةِ. Some of the Mufassirin, they point to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he speaks about the companions of the right and the left. There's a question about them. There's a su'al. In other words, it is indicating on the akhirah that when they reach before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will be questioned about their actions, whether they were good, ashabul yameen, or they were bad, ashabul shimal. They were people who were not listening to the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or following the example of the prophets of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt, the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But those who were sabiqun, as-sabiqun, again, there's no question about their actions. There's no question about their deeds. According to one of the commentaries, it says, as-sabiqun, as-sabiqun, ula'ika al-muqarrabun. That because they strove together, they were looking out for one another's, again, their dunya and their akhirah, making sure that in their dunya and their worldly life, they're fulfilling their obligations, their duties, and they're obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, so that in the akhirah, they will be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the second thing that the believer should have in order to have this ease, this raha. And of course, Zainab salamullah alayha, she embodies that because she's among those righteous women, again, who stood firm against injustice, who stood firm for justice. She did so as well with her husband Abdullah ibn Ja'far, and at the time sacrificed their sons in order to be on that path. The third thing that Imam Sadiq alayhi hafizahullah, he states that the believer should have in order to have that ease, that raha, he says, وَابْنَةٌ أَوْ أُخْتٌ يُخْرِجُهَا. Again, either a daughter, and of course this is something, at least within the Arab culture, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came forth to change the outlook and the perspective that at least the Arabs had at that time with regards to their daughters, that they were unfortunately during the time of Jahiliyyah bearing their daughters alive. And this is why they will have that questioning on the Day of Judgment. فَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. That those young baby girls, they will ask, and of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask as well, that why were they killed? For what sin were they killed? So we see that thing which Imam Ali, or that third thing which Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam is pointing out, that the mu'min, if he has that, he will be in raha. There's wabnatun, a bint, a daughter. Or if that believer had an ukhtun, again, meaning his parents had a daughter and he has a sister. And that believer, again, they are cultivating their relationship either with their daughter or that relationship with their sister, whereby, again, they become those righteous women that Imam Sadiq alayhi mentioned in the second thing, imra'atun salihah. So they have that daughter or they have that sister, and the transition of that daughter or sister from their home is either a transition whereby they're going and returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or they are going to the house and the home of their spouse. And what this indicates on, as it also relates to the life or the example that we can understand from the life of Zainab salamullah alayha, is with regards to the tarbiyah, the upbringing of our daughters. The, you could say, upbringing or the cultivation of perhaps even our sisters as well. That upbringing should be such that they have a very strong foundation in their deen, in their life, in their, again, outlook on life, in their connection to the Quran, in their connection to the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus wasalam. And this is because they will be setting the foundation for the next generation. Again, these will be the, hopefully, inshallah, those righteous women who will be giving birth to the next generation, who will be cultivating, again, their children, bringing their children up with the example of the Quran, the example of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad alayhim afdalus wasalam. So that tarbiyah is very important, as we see the tarbiyat of Zainab salamullah alayha. in the household of Amir al-Mu'mineen and Ali ibn Abi Talib. One of the things that we can see how that tarbiyah went, or if we analyze, again, the knowledge of Imam Ali and the knowledge of Fatima Zahra salamu alayha. According to one of the traditions by the Prophet, it says that their knowledge was equal. Again, if we look at the eloquence of how Imam Ali alayhi salam he spoke, and we put the sermon of Fatima Zahra beside it, the statements of Fatima Zahra beside that, we'll see that it is equal in weight in their eloquence and in their knowledge. And Zainab salamu alayha, she was a recipient of this. She also received that education, she received that understanding. And this is why also some scholars, they say that when you compare the sermon of Zainab salamu alayha, whether it be in Kufa after the event of Karbala, or in Sham, in Damascus, you see the same type of eloquence. We see the same type of style. We see the same type of courage. We see the same type of stance and positioning with regards to the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah, with regards to a stance for justice and against injustice. We see that in Zainab salamu alayha, that this was cultivated in her. It was cultivated also in the children of Zainab salamu alayha, cultivated in the lives of those individuals who Zainab taught, or she was their role model. So we see that. One of the stories, just also that we can understand even that, how important even to have a sister is as well, because this is what Imam Ali, he's stating in that last thing that the believer should have. It says either a bint, wabnatun, aw ukhtun, a daughter or a sister. In one very beautiful story from the Prophet, life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this was right after the Prophet, he was given the task, he was delegated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning the mab'ath happened, and so the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one day he was in Medina, his co-sister came to visit him, and this is one of the daughters of Halima Sa'adiyya. So Halima was as we know, she was the nursing mother of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She nursed him as a young boy. So the children of Halima, and she had other children as well by means of nursing, but she had her own children. So one of those co-sisters came to visit the Prophet after he was given this task. And he said that when she came, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stood up, he greeted her, he had a cloak on, he put the cloak on the ground and had her to sit on it, and the Prophet sat on it with her, and they were talking. And while they were talking, then one of their co-brothers also came. And the Prophet, of course, he greeted him. But there was a difference between how the Prophet, he welcomed his sister versus the way he welcomed his co-brother. Was not this on the same level. Of course, it was full of akhlaq and adab, but not on the same level. So one of the companions, he noticed this, and he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, why was there a difference in your greeting of your sister, your co-sister versus your co-brother? So the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he responded, he says, لأنها كانت أبر بوالديها منه. He says that, well, when he says, I know them, he says, my sister, again this co-sister, he said she had the best character towards her parents. أبر بوالديها منه. Yeah, he was good, he was kind, but she was more generous. She was more kind to her parents. So therefore, I gave her the respect that was due to her because of her actions, because of her character. And of course, that sister and that woman who has such character, she will instill that also in her children. In fact, in our discussions on the ideas and the concept of Tarbiyat al-Islamiyya, as we said, that when the wife, she's pregnant, or when she's pregnant with her children, it will affect how those children come out, their akhlaq, what she does during the time. So there's a direct connection with that. And so the Prophet of Allah, in this interaction with his co-sister, is showing that to have a daughter or a sister who is also righteous is among those things that the believer needs in order to have ease. So we understand from this the role of women in Islam, the status of women in Islam, that they play a very important role within the household. And particularly if they are among those righteous women like Zainab salamullah alayha, like Fatima Zahra, like Maryam, that they play that very important role. And as a matter of fact, if we want to surmise the tradition of Imam Sadiq alayhi wasallam, what he's stating is that a believer, a mu'min, a man needs a woman, a righteous woman, imra'atun salihah, because this will help him in his deen and his dunya. It will help him in striving and gaining closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen women such as Maryam, as he states, "Inna Allah astafaki wa taharaki." This is what Allah told the angels to tell Maryam, that Allah has chosen you and He's purified you. And we see this also in Zainab salamullah alayha. Actually, even from her very name. And what Zainab, it means, it comes from two words, Zain and Ab. So as we have Imam Zainul Abidin, so the ornament of ibadat and worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Zainab, it means Zainul Ab. So the ornament of her father. So this is who Zainab salamullah alayha is. She's Zainul Ab. And she embodies this idea that we find from Imam Sadiq and several of our Imam alayhim salatu wasalam, where they say, "Kunu zaynan lana, wa la takunu shaynan lana." So be an ornament for us, and don't be a sore spot for us. Don't be a symbol of disgrace for us. Zainab salamullah alayha, she embodies this. Why? Because she's Zainul Ab. She was the ornament of her father. Just as Fatima Zahra was Ummu Abiha, she's like the motherly figure, the one who takes care, the caretaker of her father. Zainab salamullah alayha is the ornament of her father, Zainul Ab. And of course, we see that in her lifestyle, we see that in her knowledge and her understanding, whereby she is said to be alimatun غير معلمة وفاهمة غير مفهمة. As Imam Zain al-Abidin said, he says, my aunt Zainab, she is the one who has knowledge without being taught. She's the one who has understanding without being made to understand. In other words, not being taught by any person, but her connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is where her education, her understanding is coming from. And this is an understanding and an education in addition to what she has learned from Imam Ali alayhi wasallam and Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha. So this is the standard that is set for women in Islam, that they should be striving to be like Fatima, striving to be like Zainab, striving to be like Maryam, striving to be like Asiya, but also at the same time, as men as well, to learn from them, to study from them, to study their life, to strive to be and have their traits and their characteristics, but also, more importantly, to benefit from such women, and particularly if they are in our lives, as our wives, imra'atun salihah, or our daughters, bint, or our sisters, ukht. And I pray that our women are able to achieve this status through self-purification, through striving to be like Zainab salamullah alayha, and that as mu'min, as believers, as believing men, that we also encourage our wives, our daughters, our sisters also to gain such knowledge and strive to be like Zainab salamullah alayha. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive our sins, to cover our shortcomings, to grant us our needs, to cure those who are ill among our friends and family members, to cure them all, and to have mercy upon our deceased ones, to hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman and make us among his helpers, his companions, and those who sacrifice their lives for him. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا واقضي حوائجنا واشف مرضانا ورحم أمواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه وتحت لواء بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أزور سيدتي ومولاتي زينب الحوراء ابنة أمير المؤمنين علي عليه السلام أصالة عني ونيابة عن والدي وعن والد والدي وجميع من قلدني الدعاء والزيارة. السلام عليك يا ابنة سلطان الأنبياء. السلام عليك يا ابنة صاحب الحوض واللواء. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابنة خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ابنة سيد الأوصياء وركن الأولياء أمير المؤمنين علي عليه السلام. السلام عليك يا ابنة ولي الله المعظم. السلام عليك يا عمة ولي الله المكرم. السلام عليك يا أم المصائب زينب ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا ابنة أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيتها الفاضلة الرشيدة. السلام عليك أيتها العاملة الكاملة. السلام عليك أيتها الجليلة الجميلة. السلام عليك أيتها التقية النقية. السلام عليك أيتها المظلومة المضطهة المقهورة. السلام عليك أيتها الرضية المرضية الزكية. السلام عليك يا تالي المعصوم. السلام عليك يا ممتحنة في تحمل المصائب بالحسين المظلوم. السلام عليك أيتها المتحيرة في وقوفك في القتلى وناديت جدك رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم بهذا النداء. صلى عليك عليك مليك السماء. هذا حسين بالعراء مسلوب العمامة والرداء، مقطع الأعضاء، وبناتك سبايا وإلى الله المشتكى. السلام على روحك الطيبة وجسدك الطاهر. السلام عليك يا مولاتي وابنة مولاي وسيدتي وابنة سيدتي ورحمة الله وبركاته. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر، وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى تعف عليهم العذاب الأليم. أتيتك يا مولاتي وابنة مولاي قاسمة وشفاعة مقبولة. السلام عليك وعلى أبنائك الطاهرين المطهرين، وعلى الملائكة المقيمين في حرمك الشريف المبارك، ورحمة الله وبركاته. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.